Thank you for plugging into this Family Life News podcast, streaming issues-driven, family-focused news. And welcome back to another edition of Issues in Education. Mondays during the Noon Report, we spotlight the issues impacting our schools with Dr. Ralph Kerr at the Teaching and Learning Institute in Houghton, New York. Ralph, since it's our first show of 2024, let me go ahead and say Happy New Year to you, sir. I don't know when that gets weird to say, but I'll do it anyway. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Bob. Happy New Year to you and to all our listeners as well. It's great to be with you again today.
Well, let's dig right in. Governor Hochul's plan to improve reading proficiency in New York, that was a big topic during last week's State of the State address. What does the governor plan to do here when it comes to reading comprehension, Ralph? And do you support it?
Well, if it wasn't so serious, it would be really funny that she called for teachers going back to basics and follow the science of reading. That seems pretty simple, and I wonder what we've been doing. But she's really calling for basic things like phonics and decoding and vocabulary and comprehension development of students, and that is critically important. I do support the initiative. I'm also aware of the fact that there are other factors that fall into this whole thing. I mean, attendance has dropped off in schools. There's an emphasis on other things in schools rather than reading, but I'm hoping that this new emphasis by the governor and others will get us where we need to be on this particular topic.
All right, let's head to Pennsylvania now, Ralph. There was a commission studying how the state doles out money for public education, and it concluded last week that the state is shortchanging districts to the tune of $5.4 billion with a B dollars. Why is it, Ralph, there never seems to be enough money for public education?
Well, this is very similar to a situation that happened in New York a few years ago where people were saying that schools had been shortchanged. I can tell you that this year, even though the state has done that, schools are still saying they don't have enough money. So in Pennsylvania, if they're able to come up with those extra billions of dollars, I can guarantee you that 2 or 3 years from now, schools will be saying again, we don't have enough money.
Yeah.
The problem with it, Bob, is that pretty much all districts are facing a decline in students, and yet their costs are increasing, some really unjustly in my mind. There are places where they have administrators, for instance, that are assistant to the assistant to the assistant, just driving the costs endlessly.
Well, Dr. Anthony Fauci, one of your favorite people, made news last week, Ralph, the former pandemic point man, told a congressional committee that he has his doubts there was much learning loss during COVID. He may be the only person on the planet that thinks that way, Ralph. Why would the good doctor say something like that?
Well, you know, some people would say that Dr. Fauci should actually be in prison. And I'm not sure that that wouldn't be a good idea because, you know, throughout all of his talking during the pandemic, he talked about following the science. And obviously he didn't do that in making the comment that he did about he doesn't believe about learning loss. Obviously, he hasn't even talked to a single teacher, because I know I have, and every teacher or person in education that I've talked to, and the research clearly shows it as well, that there was a learning loss, and it's significant. And if we're not able to recoup that loss, it's going to continue to be a problem for years.
And then finally, Ralph, since this is our first edition of Issues in Education in 2024, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about some of the issues that you think will be news front and center in the classroom in New York and Pennsylvania this year.
Well, there are 4 that I'll mention, but the last 3 are all tied to one. The first one is there's got to be some rethinking of the measurement of student success. Graduation requirements is what I'm really talking about. The other one, and it's much more encompassing, is the whole issue of finance that we talked about briefly. I believe that teachers' salaries should be dramatically increased. Right now, a person gets a 4-year degree and goes into a classroom and may be paid to start $33,000. You can work at McDonald's for $20 an hour and make that kind of money. There's a lot of money being transferred from the public school system to fund school choice. And as that continues, it's going to take money away from public schools. And then excess expense-driven aid, things like the BOCES aid and transportation, those costs are just continuing to increase. And as they increase and school enrollment is down, there is going to be a cliff that schools are going to be faced with. And I'm afraid it's going to come sooner rather than later.
All right, there we go. The top issues facing schools in 2024. If you would like to learn more about what Ralph says are the issues to watch out for this year, you have a wonderful website where folks can go and check out the Teaching and Learning Institute. What is that, sir?
That's simply whyrun.org, whyrun.org.